First, I want to start off by talking about making sure you have the exercises installed. This is the document we're going to be using today. And so you should have that either opened or installed or printed. And then the files are going to be located. If you go to Excel and you go to File Open and you go to Browse and you come down to the C folder, you should have a folder in this list called the Data folder. And so if you have the exercises installed properly, then you should have a data folder in there. Under the data folder, you'll see the file that we're going to be using, which is the Excel 365-1. And the files look something like this. So, and you click on this file right here called Interface. That's the file you should have open. And the file looks something like this here. And all it is just a file that we can use to review. So let's kind of walk through the menus a little bit first and just kind of familiar yourself with the layout of Excel. And I'm going to show you a few little zooming techniques and a few adjustments you can make to the system. So the first thing we're going to talk about is let's go to the Home tab. These are the ribbon up on top, and so the ribbon contains a whole bunch of commands, of course. But if you click on the Home ribbon tab, you're going to have the font group, you're going to have the alignment group, you're going to have the number group, and you're going to have some other styles out here. We're going to talk about this in great detail when we get to the formatting chapter. So we'll kind of look at this right now. The only thing you want to be aware of on this is that underneath of these font groups, there's this tiny little arrow. And so wherever you see a tiny arrow underneath one of these groups, you can actually click on that arrow and get more options associated with that particular group. So if there's more details behind the scenes that it didn't provide in this group, wherever you see an arrow, that's what you're going to look for. The Insert Ribbon tab, this will allow us to put things into Excel. Now let's go ahead and put a few things just to get familiar with the layout of the land and how it works. Go to the Insert Ribbon tab, and you go to Shapes, and then you come down to where you click on the happy face icon, smiley face they call it, and then you simply draw the smiley face on the screen. Now, you're going to have a Contextual Ribbon tab on the top called the Shape Format. When you highlight that, if I click out of it, that shape format disappears. But when I click on the happy face, these are all the format tools available for that particular happy face. And you click on that, you click the drop-down arrow, and you can choose a lot of other options in here, so you can see. Let me change to a different one here. The one that looks a little better. It's a little better, I think. I don't really like it too much because I don't see any this eyes are not real good. So if you come up to the right over here, I can actually change some of this information. So if I put it white on there and I want to make the weight a little wider, I can actually change that a little bit. See? So I can make changes to the happy face either through these items here, or I can simply change it manually. So if I want to switch it out to some color like that, I can do that too. I can switch this out maybe to black, and there's my happy face. I can change my thickness to be thicker if I wanted to, and you can make any kind of changes like that. So this ribbon up there is all related to the happy face or this particular object. Now, if you put a chart in, you're going to get contextual ribbons that are tied to the chart. Well, either one, you're going to have a ribbon that's going to be tied to this item. When you click out of it, that ribbon disappears, but when you click on it, then it comes back. Now, another option you have, if you right-click on the happy face, you're going to have another option called Format Shape. So you can actually right-click on the happy face, go down to where it says Format Shape, and then you're going to get up a ton more options out here. So I can click on this little middle option called Effects, open up my shadow, right-click on the happy face, and go down to where it says Format Shape. Then you should get the sidebar that pops up. And then you can actually go through and change the shadow feature to maybe the outer shadow, the first shadow option. And once you have that shadow option defined, then you can actually change the shadow adjustments. So if I want to change the angle of the shadow, I want to blur it a little bit, you can do that. Change the size of the shadow, you can make it bigger or smaller. There's just a ton of options available in Excel. to do all sorts of stuff. It can be more transparent or less transparent. So you can actually change a lot. So the idea of that is there's just so many options available in Excel that it's just like more than we can even want to count. These are just some of the capabilities of Excel. When you're done with that format shape on the side over here, I can also go to the fill and actually add in some more interesting fill capabilities. So right now, if I want to, looks like I'm not able to do that because I have the shadows on. See it? So you click on that, and then I got my solid here. I can switch this over to a gradient layout, and then it actually puts a gradient in there. And so there's just so many different options you can put in Excel. But when you're finished and you're done formatting, then you can close off that sidebar, click on the white area so that you don't have those menus popping up anymore, and then we can kind of go on from there. And so that's kind of a little bit about the Insert Ribbon tab of some things we can do there and some of the characteristics that when you input something in, you can do that. Now I have a draw command on mine. This actually came from a product called OneNote. It allows you to simply just click on these little pen tools and simply draw things. And so it's a little drawing tool is all it is. Paste up, not real useful for Excel for doing formulas and functions, but it's something they've added in there for somebody who wants to do that. Now we're going to go to the page layout tab, and we're just going to walk through some of these tabs to show you what's in here. Now we're going to talk about this in great detail when we get into printing. So we get to the printing chapter, we will go through each one of these. Matter of fact, we'll go through every single format feature available just so you know how to format things. Formulas, we're going to talk about this about an hour or so, half an hour, hour or so, when we start talking about formulas and functions. And in here, you've got your standard functions, which is your auto sums and your averages and your counts. And these are the ones we're going to focus our attention on today. In the next level class, we're going to focus our attention on a lot of these other formulas in here to show you what else is available in Excel. Now, I do have a mistake I just made here. I have this little marquee that popped up right here. And so a real important command to know about is the escape command. So I made a mistake, and if I type something right now, it'll screw up that formula. So I'm going to hit the escape key right now, and that sort of aborts out of that marquee or that mistake I had made. Go to the Data tab. This is a lot of miscellaneous stuff. There's a lot of advanced information over on this right side, and there's some import-export things over on this side. So this is a whole miscellaneous amount of information in here that you might. We're not going to be covering probably any of this in this class at all, but just showing you that is. Under the Review tab, you've got your spelling, which is your probably most important element in this ribbon. And the other one that's most important is the protection. Now in the View Ribbon tab, this is one I want to focus a little bit more time on because you can break this up several ways. If I click on this little option here called Page Break Preview, this tells me if I were to print this document right now, then this is what I would view. Now, if I don't want it to break at this point, this little dash line here, I can grab that little dash line. It looks like I'm still in the drawing tool here. So let me go back out to I clicked on my drawing tool here. See that? So I want to get out of there. We'll go back to my drawer. Now I'm back to my cursor. So View, Page Break Preview. Now I can grab this little bar here and move this around. Right here, if I want to break it at a different point, I can move this around. So that's a way to kind of change your page breaks or where your page break. If you click on the page layout view, this is used for printing also, but it's putting in your headers and footers in here. Now, if you're in the header up here, a lot of the menus will disappear on you. So you want to make sure you're in the body. We would use this for printing purposes. And a lot of times people get into this screen and they don't know how to get out of it. So you simply go to View and you go back to the normal view. So I can jump back and forth between these views. If you get stuck in a view like this, you've got to get out of it. Again, if I'm in the header, then the normal view is disabled. That's because I'm in the header. If you click out of the header and go back to the body, then you can jump into the normal view. So we usually work in the normal view, but you can jump in between these various views if you needed to. These little buttons here are, like if I turn the grid lines on or off, sometimes they get turned off. and you might want to turn those back on. The formula bar, sometimes that gets turned off, and the heading sometimes gets turned off. So you can turn those back on. They usually keep those on all the time, but just to let you know that that's what happens. Now, another thing you can do is we want to be able to zoom in quickly. So one little technique you can use, if you select an area, like say I want to work on this area right here, I can highlight that area by simply clicking on the A1 and dragging it down and selecting the areas that I want to work on. And I can click on this button called Zoom to Selection. That will actually zoom into that specific area. When I'm done working on that area, I say go back to 100%, and it drops him back out. Then I can select another area and say I want to work on this area. I can say Zoom to Selection. I can work on the area, then I can zoom out. So the idea of this is that a lot of times what I see people do is on the lower right corner, there's a little zoom slider. So I zoom in on this, but that's not really where I need to work. So then I find myself scrolling around, looking around for what I'm trying to zoom in on. And so he ends up taking 2 or 3 or 4 clicks to find what you're actually looking for. But when you use the Zoom to Selection, you can just highlight the area that you want to zoom in on. You zoom straight there, and then when you're done, you just zoom out. And so the idea is it's a little bit quicker to zoom in and out. You want to be able to reduce the number of commands, the number of clicks that you're going to use to actually modify the stuff. So there's a couple of zooming related features. There's also this detailed zoom. You can zoom to different levels of zoom if you needed to. So that's kind of a little bit about the zoom. Now let's go down to the lower right corner. We have the zoom slider. And this, a lot of people discover the zoom slider, and so we want to make sure we point that out. And you can kind of click on that plus and minus key and zoom in and zoom out, and that's pretty obvious to use. But the problem is sometimes the zoom slider disappears. And so we want to show you how to configure the system so that it's laid out the way you want. On the lower bar, bottom bar here, if I right-click on that bottom bar, a little menu pops up. So these are things that we can add to the configuration of the system. And you see there's an option here called Zoom Slider. If I turn off the Zoom Slider, now my Zoom Slider disappeared. Now I'm not really showing you how to turn it off. What I'm trying to show you is how to turn it on if it gets turned off. And so you have to know how to get your system back to a normal working mode. So you right-click here and you say, oh, the Zoom slider got turned off for some reason. And then you can turn that back on, and now you have the Zoom slider again. And the same thing goes when you select several cells up here like this, several numbers. You can actually come down to your status bar, and you can actually see what that selected area equals. So there's the sum of that selected area. There's the count of that area, and here's the average of that area. So if I select another area and I want to find out what that area is, I can look at that information. But that information is based on what's defined. So when I right-click on the status bar, see, it tells me that those values are turned on. There's my sum function, and there's my count, and there's my average. There's a couple others in here that we have turned off. But again, if you don't have that feature, then maybe it's turned off on your system. So you have to know how to turn it back on if it gets turned off. Now, up at the top of the screen, if you double-click on the Home Ribbon tab, then that collapses your menus. A lot of people, they do this by accident, but if you double-click again, it actually brings it back. And there's several other ways to get it back. If you double-click on it, over on the right side, up the upper right side, there is a little option where you can actually show the tabs. You see, you can turn that on or off too. See this way. So there are other ways to do that, but half the time we do it by accidentally double-clicking on one of these tabs. I had somebody stop me one time in a hall and said, hey, Jeff, could you help me fix my computer? And I said, sure. So I said, what's wrong? He said, I lost my ribbon. I said, well, how long has this been a problem? He said, about a week. And I go, how come you didn't ask somebody? And he goes, oh, I was afraid that people would think I didn't know what I was doing. Well, these are simple things, okay? These are the things that you need to know how to use Excel. If your menu gets collapsed, how do you get it back? You just double-click and bring it back, okay? So that is part of the objective of what we're trying to do. Now at the very top of your screen up here, you have a little thing called the Quick Access Toolbar. See this little toolbar on the top. Now some of you might be down below this ribbon here. Sometimes it gets stuck down below here. If it gets stuck down below there, it's because it got moved down there. So see, now mine is below there. So you can move that up on the top or on the bottom. I usually keep it on the top. But this allows us to do quick commands. So if I click on that drop-down arrow that's on the right side of that little Quick Access Toolbar, I can choose this button called Open. This is going to open up a new blank file. So if I open up a new blank file, it puts an icon up there. Now, I can click on that icon to create a new blank Excel sheet. And that was pretty quick. Now, how would I do that otherwise? You would go to File, that's one click. New, that's 2 clicks. And then Blank Workbook, that's 3 clicks. So I was able to do 3 clicks down to 1 click. Now, if you do that 3 or 4 times a day, then that's going to save you 2 clicks. So if say you do it 6 times a day, that's going to save you 12 clicks, basically. You can do things much quicker. If you can apply that same concept to 5 other commands or 20 other commands, you can see how you can start getting some savings in times. So click on that drop-down arrow, and these are some of the commands that are available that you can add in there. Now, if you want to add other commands in, you can do that too. So you click on that little drop-down arrow, go down to the very bottom, it says More Commands, and I'll give you one guess what you think this is. How about More Commands? If you click on the More Commands, you have what's called Popular Commands, Commands Not in the Ribbon, and All Commands. So everybody kind of knows what a popular command is. Those are probably the most commonly used commands that people would want to add into the system. But this one here is kind of unusual. I'm going to explain what this is. These are actually commands that are not in the ribbon. Well, that wasn't too hard, was it? Let me explain how I would use it. That's the key. I've had people come to me and say, hey, Jeff, I'm looking for a command and I can't find it. If I find it in this ribbon, that tells me that the command's not available. It's not in the ribbon. So I would go back and tell them, don't worry about looking for it anymore. It's not there. And they turn to me and they say, you're a genius. I just kind of know where to look. So if you are looking for a command, make sure it's in the ribbons. If it's not there, then you know you're wasting your time. Now you come down to this button here called All Commands. This is every single command on the system. Not every command made it into the ribbons. So I can come down here and add any command I use on a regular basis, I can add in there. So it looks like I have 2 bolds for some reason. I'm going to add one of my bolds in here, and I'm going to simply use that. If I add the bold command in, there's something I might want to use on a regular basis. Say OK, and that should add, the bold command should have been added here. Maybe I just added the wrong one. Let me do the other one. I don't know why I've got 2 of them, but so here's the other one. When I was inactive or something. Oh, there it is. There. See, it popped in there. See it? So this is the bold command. So that means that if I'm in some other menu over here like this, and I want to make it bold, then I have to actually go back to the Home tab and hit the bold this way. That took a couple of clicks. But if I'm in another ribbon over here and I want to make something bold like this, I would just click on that and I hit my bold up in the ribbon up there. So the idea is that you can add any command you want up in this ribbon, any command you use on a regular basis. You can, the name of this command is called the Quick Access Toolbar, which means we're going to have quick access to this information. And then, of course, you have your formula bar in the middle here. These are some of the layout of the screen. So that's a little bit about just the menu systems and the Quick Access Toolbar to do things a little quicker. And you can actually go through and look at that. So we're going to go to the File Ribbon tab. And we're going to look at this back. This is called the Backstage view. I call it the File menu, but they're trying to get away from the menu concept. They're trying to go back to the ribbon concept. So when you go to the File tab, then you have a list of commands. Of course, we know what a new is. We'll create a new document. There's also some documents down below here that you have which are called templates. And these are documents you can use for starting templates. Or you can also click on these different categories in here and actually see templates related to those categories. You can also go to the search engine here and search for a specific type of document. So say you're going to do an inventory sheet, or you're going to do a budget, or you're going to do some other type of invoice or something. There are templates for every single one of these tasks. And so you might use a template as a good starting point to get things going. Now, my wife came to me the other day and asked me if I would create her a calendar. And I said, well, I'm a little bit busy right now, but I'll get around to it. An hour later, she asked me again. So I realized she's going to keep asking, so I might as well go through and create a calendar. So I go to this little search box and type calendar, and it's going to show me a list of calendars that's available. And I can find one I think she might like. Maybe I'll choose this one here. And it says create the calendar. So I created the calendar. And that was pretty quick. She came to me a little later and asked me if I ever created the calendar for her, and I said yes. But it took forever. And she thanked me and made me dinner for that night and treated me like a king for the day, right? Because I helped her out so much. Someday she's going to figure out that it's not that hard. Okay. Now we want to be able to switch back and forth between screens. So we'll show you that in a second, but right now let's kind of finish up this menu here. Of course, you got your open. Everybody knows what this is. You've opened files before. And we always use the browse to go browse for additional files. We'll look for this in the future. These here are, what's important about this screen are these names here. So these names are important because these are the names that you're going to, the previous files you've opened up, like yesterday and stuff like this. The problem is if you keep opening more files, these files push down and they eventually drop off. So there's a really important feature right here that you need to be aware of. If you click on the interface file that you have open right now, and see there's a little button here called this little push pin. This little pin. Now I'm going to pin that file to be permanently part of this screen. Now this is an Office feature. This is not an Excel feature. This is an Office feature. Means that now this file will always remain on this list. So as we go through the class, you're going to see at the end of the class that this file will always be at the top. These are things that we use on a regular basis. This is our budget. This is our inventory sheet. This is our working sheet for keeping track of our finances. This is what we use all the time. So you want to pin those particular items so they would always remain at this list. That's what's most important about this particular screen. You also have this option here called folders that this keeps track of your most commonly used folders. So again, if I want to take this folder and pin this one, so that one will always remain on the list. And as I open more folders, then that will always stay on the top and I'll always have that accessible to me. So you can go back and you can either pin files or folders, either way. Under the info command, these are just several analysis tools in here. Here's your version history. Here's your various things. This is some protection feature. We talk about that in other classes too. This is what's called check for issues. This goes through and looks for if your compatibility with this file. Maybe it's an older version of Excel. But there's a couple other inspections in here, and these are kind of advanced tools. The other thing I think that might be useful for you is this option over here called properties. It's a little hard to find. It's kind of off to the right a little bit. You don't notice it right away. But under advanced properties, what that shows you is kind of how the document is defined. So you can usually it puts in your username in here as the author, and you can put in a title and a subject. Now you may not want this information here. Say you're going to take this spreadsheet and you're going to post it on the internet for some reason, and you may not want your information stamped on this particular file. So you could actually just remove this if you didn't want it. Sometimes people don't realize that they put that in there and that gets put in there by default. Of course, your save as. I have an option called Save as PDF. I'm not sure if you have that on yours or not. But you could save a PDF file either through this, or I can simply say save as. If I say save as and then browse, there is a list of options that you can save the file as. So you can see that if you don't have that option that I have on mine, you can always come down here and save it as a PDF file down here. So say, for example, you want to send it to somebody, but you don't want to have the ability to modify it. Well, you can either secure the file, or you can just print it as a PDF file or save it as a PDF file, and therefore it will be a flat file at that point, and they wouldn't be able to make the changes. There are other file formats we can save it off as. This one here is an older version of Excel, and so if somebody you're working with has an older version and they can't open your file for some reason, you can save it off as an older version and send it to them that way. There's also some comma delimited files in here and a few other things. You might want to save it off to be compatible with somebody else. But PDF is probably the most commonly used one. Let's look at a few more here. Now, this is the print feature, so we're going to go through this in great detail when we get to the printing piece. This is an important one now, because if you click on the share button, and maybe all of you have the share, I'm hoping, you might have another feature called, there's another option that used to be there, but it's the same capabilities. So you go to share, you go to email, and I can actually email this as an attachment. So if I want to email this file, and the problem with email is that a lot of times what we do is we open up our email system, we address the person, and then we attach our file. And then we're getting ready to send the file, and we think to ourselves, I wonder if that was the right file. So what do? You open up the file to make sure it's the right file, correct? I call that a waste of time. What you need to do is open up the Excel file first, open up the file that you want to email, and then you simply go to File, Share, Email, and send it as an attachment. So I say send it as an attachment. It simply opens up my email, and it actually attaches the file directly to it. I know it's the right file because I just had it open. And then I can simply, and that puts the subject in, the name of the file is put in here. You do address the person here, and you can just, I'll just email it to this other email address, and I simply say send. It's that easy. So again, it's a little quicker to open up the file first before you actually go through and do that. And it's got some export and some published and some close. The published deals with called Power BI, and Power BI is a new product of Excel. It's a spin-off of Excel. It used to be part of Excel. They pulled it out of Excel and made a whole new product line out of it called Power BI. And I teach quite a few classes in that area too. And then we have some accounting and stuff on the bottom. Essentially, that's all it is. So we'll click on this little arrow and go back to our Excel. Now, we want to be able to switch screens. I've opened up several files here. So I want to be able to switch the screens. There are several ways to do this. One way to do that would be to go to View, go to your switch windows, and you can switch between your windows this way. So if you want to go back to the interface file, you can choose interface this way. Another common way would be to click on the little Excel icon on the bottom. That's what a lot of people do. But this isn't what I'm going to show you. Those are fairly obvious to figure out. I'm going to show you a different command. And this is you hold the Alt key down on the keyboard. I'm not sure you're going to be able to do this with some of the Surface devices. But if you hold the Alt key down on the keyboard and keep the finger down on the Alt key, then hit the Tab several times. This is actually a Windows command that allows me to jump from window to window to window. Now, the idea of that is I keep hitting the Tab and I'm jumping from window to window. Because oftentimes we don't want to go from Excel to Excel. We want to go to Excel to maybe Outlook. Or we want to go to Excel to maybe Word. You see, so this is a Windows command that allows you to switch windows from application to application. And so that's another way to switch it back. But we can switch it back over to this particular file here, this interface file. If you did get a little lost and buried into the system, you can look at it from that perspective. Now let me go back and kind of breeze through this really quick. Like there's a lot of commands in here, a lot more than I would cover in the class, but here's your contextual, here's your galleries. We talk about, the happy face gallery. That's what a gallery is. Here's your zoom features. We talked about the zoom features. Here's the zoom slider. Here's the status bar. Here's the minimize, maximize. We didn't talk about that, but that's in the upper right corner. Looks like you can hide ribbons by double-clicking on them. Here's your quick access toolbar. So everything, you see, I covered a lot of this in here. So it's all written in the book. And so you go back through the book, look through some of these things, and here's some other more advanced topics. So now we're going to get into some, this is some cell referencing and ranges, gets into the mini toolbar, and a few other subjects in here. Then it talks about the backstage view, how to create a new workbook. I put the keyboard command in here for that. Looks like it's Control-N. Looks like you can create templates. We talked about templates a minute ago. So there's a lot of gray sections in here, a lot more advanced stuff that you might want to use. There's save as. I think I have the pinning feature in here too somewhere. Here it is right there. So there's the pinning feature. If you want to pin a file, there's the concept to do that. And there's the recent file, seeing the recent files out there. So there's just a lot of capabilities in here. I think one I didn't really touch on too much was the mini toolbar, which is pretty obvious, but when you right-click on a cell, it comes up with this little menu here, but then the mini toolbar pops up on top. So sometimes it's kind of a nice way to format something, to make it bold, maybe to change the color of it, something like that. You can do that with a mini toolbar pretty easy. But when you right-click on a cell, that's when you're going to get this information.